Lady Janice, esteemed members of the Compton family, trustees of the Sir John Compton Memorial Foundation, Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre, honored guests, the head table, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is truly an honor to join you this evening to celebrate the centenary of the birth of Sir John George Melville Compton, the father of our nation's independence, a statesman whose vision, discipline, and sense of destiny have indelibly shaped the St. Lucia that we know today. And permit me to frame these remarks with an unexpected, deliberately provocative, but revealing lens, a quotation from Karl Marx. Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. Marx was not writing about Sir John, but in many ways he could have been. Sir John Compton made his own history, not under circumstances of his choosing, but within the inherited constraints of colonial subjugation, economic dependency, and social stratification. What made him exceptional was his refusal to allow those circumstances to define the boundaries of his imagination. He belonged to that generation of brilliant young West Indians, sons of small villages, nurtured in modest homes, but steeped in moral seriousness, who won scholarships to study at the heart of the British Empire. The system's intent was clear: to fashion colonial gentlemen, Afro-Saxons as some historians have called them, capable of administering the colonies but never transforming them. Sir John could easily have returned to that comfort, but he chose instead to confront the raw inequities he saw in the countryside, the collapse of the plantation system, the hunger and hopelessness of rural communities left behind by empire. That encounter between his education and his environment ignited a conviction that St. Lucians must be the authors of their own destiny. I am sure we all have seen the video interview given by Sir John to Jacinta Anus Lee, in which he describes his sense of anguish, his anger over the grinding boot of colonialism, and the yearning to be deciders of one's own destiny and the owners of our corner of God's earth. In fact, in that interview, he actually broke down when he described seeing a group of villagers in Centenary walking with a cardboard box in which the body of a child who had died of bilharzia was being taken to the graveside. Every great leader is defined by their capacity to see beyond the limits of their time, to imagine what could have been when others only see what is. Sir John's leadership, though often austere and pragmatic, was animated by that visionary impulse. He understood that independence was not simply a political act, but a psychological revolution, a reclaiming of dignity. He made history by laying the foundations of a modern St. Lucia, championing education as the ultimate equalizer, asserting St. Lucia's place in regional and global affairs, and giving institutional form to the dream of integration through the creation of the OECS. He was seminal in the formation of the OECS. His famous declaration that he was, and I quote, "more interested in tomorrow's children than in today's vote," end of quote, remains one of the most profound articulations of statesmanship in our region. A reminder that the true measure of leadership is the capacity to plant seeds whose fruit one may never live to taste. No leader, as I once said, is without flaw or contradiction. But history, like the sea that shaped this island, erodes the transient and reveals the enduring. Legacy is the distillation that remains after the passions of the moment have faded. In Sir John's case, What endures is not merely his political longevity, but the moral architecture of his vision. Service before self, discipline before desire, and nation before party. I recall not long after his retirement, receiving an unexpected message from Sir John requesting a meeting. The purpose, he said, was to discuss his biography. The University of the West Indies had proposed to assign an academic to the task, but he had declined. "I want you to write it," he said. I was taken aback. "But Sir John," I protested, "you know my radical history." He smiled and says, "What matters is not why I ask you, but whether you will agree." This was a moment that revealed his confidence, not merely in himself, but the ability of history to reconcile opposing truths, to weave together the strands of contradiction into coherence. He was a man secure enough in his legacy to invite scrutiny, because he understood that history, properly told, is not flattery. In truth, it is truth rendered through time. I felt truly privileged by his implied confidence in asking me to tell his story, history. This evening, we are not simply remembering Sir John, we are continuing his work. Sir John Compton Memorial Foundation, under Lady Janice's steadfast leadership, has embodied his conviction that education is the pathway out of poverty and the foundation of freedom. For 15 years, some of us may have thought the foundation was starting today. For 15 years, this foundation has quietly transformed lives, paying examination fees for students in need, providing transportation for young musicians such as those we saw today, supporting teachers' studies, and helping schools acquire instruments that enrich the spirit as much as the mind. And now in this centenary year, by dedicating tonight's proceeds to the creation of a national museum, the foundation is enabling St. Lucia to know itself, to tell its own story through its own voice. For a nation that prides itself on producing Nobel laureates in economics and literature, the absence of a national museum is a silence that must be filled. And the OECS Commission is honored to make a modest financial contribution to that cause. If this is the challenge being undertaken by the foundation, I would like to issue my own challenge to this audience and to all who have interacted with Sir John to document in writing or through video recollection their stories and experiences of the man and the leader, so that the foundation may fill that particular silence. Sir John would have understood the importance of that mission. He knew that no people can chart their future without first understanding their past. If, as Marx suggested, and I quote, "the tradition of all dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living," then Sir John's legacy offers the opposite, a light, a lineage of leadership that liberates rather than burdens. He was not trapped by the weight of tradition, he transformed it. He made his own history in the only way history can truly be made, by turning constraint into creation, circumstance into purpose, and nationhood into reality. May the foundation's work continue to illuminate the path, inspiring future generations to believe, as he did, that destiny is not written for us, but by us. Thank you.